The price of freedom. The sun dipped low over the horizon, casting the last light of day on the crumbling shore of Cuba. Raul, his wife Isabel, and their 5-year-old daughter Mariana stood on the beach, looking at the makeshift raft they had painstakingly built over weeks. The oppressive regime had stolen their peace, their dreams, their future. Raul had spoken out too many times, and now silence had become their only safety. Tonight, they would escape. "We're going to make it, Isabel," Raul whispered, his voice a mixture of fear and determination. "This is the only way." Isabel, clutching Mariana to her chest, nodded but said nothing. The child, blissfully unaware of the danger, clung to her mother, her small hands tracing the fabric of the raft. With no other options, they pushed the raft into the dark waters and began their journey into the unknown. The night swallowed them whole as the Cuban coast disappeared behind them. The sea, though calm at first, soon grew angry. The waves thrashed at their fragile vessel, and the wind howled like a ghost in the night. Raul fought the rudder with all his strength, trying to keep the raft steady. Hours passed, each wave crashing harder than the last. Mariana cried, her tiny voice barely audible over the roar of the storm. Isabel soothed her, but even her comforting words seemed lost in the chaos. Raul held the mast, praying for the storm to end. Then, just as quickly as it had started, the tempest passed, leaving them in eerie silence. When dawn broke, the sea was calm, but the world around them felt different. They had drifted far from Cuba, too far. There was no land in sight, no boats, no signs of life. Just endless water stretching in every direction. Raul checked the compass, but it spun wildly, as if mocking him. They were lost. The days blended into nights, the sun beating down relentlessly by day and the cold settling in as night fell. With no food or fresh water, their hopes began to fade. Mariana grew weak, and Isabel, always strong for her daughter, began to show cracks in her resolve. Raul refused to give up, though. He had promised his family freedom, and he would die before breaking that promise. On the 7th day, as the sun began to sink into the horizon, a shadow moved in the water. A fin. The sharks had found them. At first, it was just one, then another, and another. Soon, the entire surface of the sea seemed to shimmer with fins, circling them like wolves. Raul stood at the front of the raft, trying to keep the sharks at bay with a makeshift spear, his heart pounding in his chest. Isabel held Mariana close, her eyes wide with terror, whispering prayers under her breath. The sharks were growing bolder, sensing weakness. They attacked with terrifying speed, their jaws snapping just inches from the raft. Raul's arms were trembling, but he fought back, stabbing at the water as though it would keep them safe. The raft rocked violently, and for a moment, Raul feared they would be torn apart. "We can't hold on much longer," Isabel cried, her voice breaking. Raul knew she was right. The sea, the storm, the hunger, the terror, it was all too much. But he could not, would not, let them die here. Not like this. With a final desperate scream, Raul thrust the spear down into the water, its tip cutting through the dark sea with all his remaining strength. For a moment, there was only silence, as if the ocean itself held its breath. Then, the sharks began to retreat, their hunger momentarily sated by the blood in the water. Raul collapsed to his knees, gasping for air, but the terror was not over. They were still lost, still adrift in a world without hope. And yet, somehow they were still alive. As the last rays of daylight faded, Raul held his family close, the raft drifting aimlessly on the endless sea. He didn't know if they would survive. But in that moment, surrounded by the vast, unforgiving ocean, he made one final vow. As long as they had breath, they would fight. Raul lay in the bottom of the raft, his body aching from the days of hunger and constant fear. The memory of his little girl, Mariana, kept him going. The way her innocent eyes sparkled when he promised her a future of freedom, a future in the United States. He had told her that they would be safe there, free from the oppression and fear that haunted their lives on the island. He had promised Isabel, too, the life they dreamed of, full of opportunities, joy, and the hope that had long been stolen from them by the cruelty of the regime. They would start fresh, build a life together in the land of freedom, just a few miles to the north. But now, as they drifted in this vast, uncharted sea, Raul couldn't comprehend how the cost of that freedom could be so high. He had known the dangers of the ocean, but never had he imagined this. The endless days without food, the haunting nights filled with the primal terror of being surrounded by hungry sharks, the constant grip of helplessness. They had survived the first attack, but it had only been a fleeting victory. As the night descended once more, bringing with it the cold, the silence, and the dark, Raoul knew the sharks would return. The sea had tasted blood, and now it was hunting. And then they came, fins slicing the surface of the water, circling once more. Raoul's heart pounded as he stood, spear in hand, trying to steady himself against the relentless rocking of the raft. Isabel held Mariana close, whispering comforting words that neither of them believed. This time, the sharks were faster, more determined. Raoul fought them off as best as he could, thrusting the spear into the water with all his strength. The moonlight glinted off the sharp, dark bodies beneath the waves, but they were relentless. A shadow surged toward the raft with terrifying speed. Raoul swung the spear with all his might, but in his desperation, he misjudged the movement. The raft rocked violently, sending him off balance. His foot slipped, and in an instant, he was plunged into the black water below. The cold hit him like a hammer. His heart raced as he floundered, the water thick with the presence of the sharks. He could hear their jaws snapping just beneath the surface, a sound that would haunt him forever. He kicked and thrashed, trying to find his way back to the raft, but the water seemed to pull him deeper. He heard a scream, Isabel's voice, high and terrified. "Raoul!" But it was too late. He was already lost. The sharks descended, quick and merciless. Raoul felt a searing pain, and then a final, overwhelming darkness. He never saw the raft again. He never saw Isabel or Mariana again. The following morning, the raft remained adrift, empty and silent. The once promising journey had turned into a nightmare, a brutal reminder that the cost of freedom was sometimes more than a family could bear. Isabel and Mariana were left alone, floating in the middle of the sea. She hugged her daughter close, too afraid to cry, too afraid to give in to the grief that threatened to overwhelm her. She didn't know what to do anymore, only that she had to survive, for Mariana's sake. The sharks had taken Raoul, but they hadn't taken her will to live. As the sun rose over the endless ocean, Isabel whispered a promise of her own. "We will make it, my love. We will make it." The first rays of sunlight touched the sandy beach as Isabel slowly stirred, still wrapped in the exhaustion of the journey. Her body ached, and her mind was a haze of confusion and loss. Beside her, Mariana slept peacefully, her chest rising and falling in the gentle rhythm of a child who had seen too much but somehow remained untouched by it all. The storm, the sharks, the ocean's unrelenting hunger, they were all gone now. Isabel's eyes opened fully, the quiet morning air mingling with the scent of salt water. She glanced around and, for the first time in days, allowed herself a moment of hope. "Mariana," she whispered, gently shaking her daughter awake. "We made it, my love." Mariana's blue eyes fluttered open, and when she saw her mother, a smile spread across her face. "Mom, we're here," she exclaimed, her voice full of disbelief and joy. Isabel sat up slowly, her body protesting the movement, but the sight of her daughter's smiling face gave her the strength to push through. They had survived. They had made it. But before Isabel could fully process the relief, a distant sound pierced the air, faint at first, but unmistakable, the deep, mechanical roar of a helicopter engine. Both women froze, instinctively turning toward the sound. The helicopter grew louder, and then, in a blur of motion, Mariana gasped and pointed. "Mom, it's Dad, she screamed, her small voice breaking through the tension. Isabel's heart skipped a beat as she looked up, squinting against the sun. There, in the distance, was a figure, a man running toward them. His legs pumped with urgency, his arms outstretched in the same desperate hope that had kept them going through all these days at sea. "Raoul!" Isabel cried, her voice choked with emotion. She stumbled to her feet, and with Mariana in her arms, they both ran toward him. Raoul's face was a mixture of exhaustion, joy, and disbelief. As the distance between them closed, he dropped to his knees, opening his arms wide. Isabel and Mariana collided with him, their embrace the culmination of every sacrifice, every tear, every battle they had fought. The three of them held each other, the world fading away. There was only the warmth of their embrace, the relief of being together again. Mariana, her face pressed against her father's chest, looked up and asked in a soft, innocent voice, "Are we free now, Dad?" Raoul, his voice tender and full of love, kissed her forehead and whispered, "Yes, my love, we are free now. We are free now. We are free." For a moment, they stood there, just the three of them, as the helicopter hovered above, a reminder of the world outside their small, perfect family. The sound of the engine seemed to fade into the background, drowned out by the happiness in their hearts. They began walking along the beach, hand in hand, not knowing where the road ahead would lead, but knowing that together they could face anything. However, far above them, the voice of the helicopter pilot crackled over the radio, unaware of the family's tender reunion. "Yes, we see two dead bodies on the beach, a woman and what appears to be a small child with blonde hair." A response came a few seconds later, cold and impersonal. "Roger that. We'll send the Coast Guard to pick up the bodies. Roger and out."